What I'm seeking to do here is I'm really looking to share with you some of the impactful financial systems that I have been able to use over the years, and I have shared with so many people in my profession. And I think that the impact it's had on the people that I've been able to share with will also make a difference in your life. So I was exposed to this system as an adult. I made so many mistakes, and then over the years I had to retrace my steps and then correct my mistakes. The lessons I learned on that journey is what I'm looking to share with you, or to you really being blessed by all of the information that I'm about to share on this channel.
So when we're going into this book and you're talking about the clarity, now can you talk about your key pillars? Don't go too much into it because we got to buy the book, but can you really just touch on some of the key pillars of the basic financial framework?
Absolutely. So when you think about the pillar, George, you know what they said, because I studied the financial system outside, from an outsider perspective, you don't grow up with a lot of these things. You come in as a foreigner and then you are now trying to understand what is going on here. So I use the framework of a house, right? Yeah. And I realized that on the foundation of the house, you have to have budgeting. I call it budgeting / banking, because we are touched by the banking industry at every level. But your budgeting is how you manage your finances. And when I go into budgeting, I always tell people it's not really, it's a bad word. I like to use priority. Just making sure that you have priority of what your expenses are, what is most important to you, and then making sure that your money goes to that first. And we go through an interesting exercise with that. But budgeting, and then if you have that, the financial management piece as your foundation, then the investment, that is saving for your future, trying to create a way your money can make you money. And then your credit, the credit system is heavy. Credit can be the difference between somebody paying 2% and you paying 10%. So whatever you do, credit becomes a key part of your financial well-being. And then you have your taxes, tax planning. You know, I'm a tax accountant, so that's heavy. So I think tax planning is really important. But when you have these frameworks well set up, you cannot avoid incidentals. So you need to manage your risk. And that is where insurance comes in. A lot of people don't like insurance, so I like the word risk management. And what that is anything you cannot afford to replace, you have to insure. Anything you cannot afford to replace, you definitely want to insure. And that is how you have to think about risk management. You think about it in terms of what are the things I have that I don't have. And that includes, if you are no more, who's going to take care of my family? That is risk I cannot afford not to protect. So risk management is like the umbrella, the roof over your financial house. Yes.
That is I like the analogy of the house, especially when you go into your book and you talk about those risk managements, you make us reflect on the priorities that we have. And one of the things I thought, and I'm just going to throw this out there because my pastor is here, my priority is tithing. So we got to make sure our number one priority is tithing. But no, and even when you talk about instead of the budgeting, I like how you use priority, because most times we hear about budgeting. And when you look at your income and things like that, what if I don't have anything to budget? So when we have an economy, when we have people who are in those situations, and you told the story of the young mother who felt overwhelmed about her debt, if someone is feeling overwhelmed financially, what's the very first step you recommend for them?
That's good. So like I said, it starts with the clarity, right? In my class, I do a very interesting exercise. I had a finance class I just did at the Victorious Believers Ministry, my church. So in the class, one of the first things I do is let's do a budget, right? So everybody draw your budget. So everybody writes down what they believe is really important to them. They go through the lines, write their budget down. Then I told them to bring their financial statements the next week. Then you look at your financial statements and you look at your budget and you see there's always a disconnect. It's always interesting. People think in ideal situations, but in practice, they do very differently. And one of the things, when Ivy and I started off in our finances, one of the very things that really struck me on budgeting is you realize that you plan, I pay my rent, I pay this, and On the 31st, Netflix will come and take their money. Now your rent is short by $10. Then you get a negative account, and then you have a $30 bill. That used to throw me off. It was really stressful because I call it the unimportant things taking the place of important things, and it messing your finances up. And that became really the heart of one of the reasons why I had to redesign my whole budgeting system, because I realized that you get to a place where the things that you're trying to avoid keeps getting in the way, and then you begin to spend money on things you really don't. Sometimes you really need shoes, so you go buy the shoe because you don't need it but you want it. Then you realize, oh, my utility bill have not been paid, and by the time that comes to your realization, it's too late. So what I always tell people to do is, if you want to get started, print out all your statements the past 3 months and use that to design your budget. Do not do it from your head. Do it from your bank statement. That is really a good place to start.
That's good. I was wondering if you're telling me to cancel my subscriptions, but no, just telling them to manage them properly. So with this information about the budgeting, and you shared with us that you spent some time writing this book and putting the data together, what was the one thing that surprised you during this whole process? What surprised you the most in the information that we'll read that you can share with us?
Well, honestly, it was how disconnected even me in terms of trying to be financially conscious, because my journey started in 2015, but it took me over 3 years to really master budgeting. When I say master, to have a system in place that works. I could never master it because it was one of those things that life was always happening. You think you are doing well, and then all of a sudden your child is sick or your car messed up. Even if you have emergency funds, sometimes they are not enough because emergencies come in batches. They don't come one at a time. They come in batches. So it's almost like you are always being thrown a curveball. So it was really interesting to me to find out that the discipline to budget is not that easy. So one of my favorite quotes is, never put yourself in a situation where you use willpower. So rather than me having to use the discipline to budget, let me create a system that budgets for me without me having to do it myself. So automation became my strategy. I automated everything that is important. So if it's important to me, I automate. And that means that amount is coming and it's being given priority. And everything else that I want but I don't need, I don't give too much priority. So if you look at the budgeting plan I talk about in the book, it's designed around being able to prioritize your finances. And that small adjustment can be the difference maker. But that was, to me, the biggest gap that I saw. It was almost like night and day. You want to do well, but it's almost like you cannot do well. It's like you keep finding yourself going in circles. And that was one of the biggest challenges that I faced. So that was a surprise part.
When what you're sharing, it sounds like your book is very practical. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of jargon where I have to have an MBA to understand it. The work that you put into the basic financial framework is really for anyone to read it, and it's practical that you can make use of it now.
That was the point. So the goal of the book really is to try to, in an easy way, through my story, give people a tool to really understand how to look at their finances holistically. In fact, the book doesn't teach you to be rich. It's just there to expose you to the financial system and give you a tool to really understand what the US financial system is made up of. And then whatever your financial goal is, you can then design that yourself. And so that was important to me because there was a question that I was given when we were doing one of the classes, and the lady was like, I've heard on social media that if you take a HELOC and then use it to pay your bills, and then he asked that. And it was so interesting to me because sometimes you hear things like that, and for everybody it's different. As an accountant, we serve so many clients. I have never, George, not two people that have the same thing. Everybody is so different. So a strategy may work for one person, but it may not work for the next one. And everybody has a different family dynamics, different value system. You know, we all, as a Ghanaian, one of the challenges I know I have as a Ghanaian is, even though I'm married, I have an obligation at home. So no matter what I do with my finances, there has to be a place in my money to support home. It's just part of my culture. That may not be somebody's reality, right? So I realized that here in the US or most places, not everybody has the same financial path to success. So the most important thing for me was to just give an education on the framework. And I think especially for if you are blessed to be starting out right now, this is a great book because then you get to see the picture even before you start out. That way, whatever it is your desire is to build, you have something to build on. It doesn't come in a vacuum. You understand? Because you can do it, but it's not easy when you've already messed it up and trying to reset it.